Today we're going to be going over the Gini coefficient, the Lorenz curve, and general inequality. Now, inequality is a type of a market failure. A market failure is simply just a failing in capitalism, something that capitalism doesn't necessarily provide or cause, and it's one of the issues regarding capitalism. Inequality just means that wealth is distributed unfairly against a population. So that means the ultra wealthy, let's say, own 50% of the wealth, and then the bottom 10%, so the poorest 10%, own maybe 1% or something like that, where all the money is concentrated amongst the ultra wealthy. Now, there's a healthy level of equality and there's an unhealthy level of inequality, and it all depends on certain situations. Here is the Gini coefficient in a Lorenz curve. The Lorenz curve tries to measure the rate of inequality that we see. So here we have three different lines. This is perfect equality. This here is feasible equality, and this is the actual income distribution of the United States. So what does this all mean? The x-axis is different individuals based on their income. So 0 stands for the poorest individual. 100 stands for the richest individual. And then this shows the income earned, so how much money they actually have. So you can see the perfect equality one makes sense. 0%, the poorest person owns 0%. 30% of the population owns 30% of the wealth. 50% of the population owns 50%. 80% of the population owns 80%. 90% owns 90%, etc., etc. Basically, it's almost equivalent. So that's perfect equality. Feasible equality is where more wealth is concentrated amongst the ultra wealthy. It's not perfect. So here, 10% own only like 2% of the wealth, something like that. 40% own 15% of the wealth, as you see in the graph. 80%, and this is where things start growing, 80% own somewhere around 65% of the wealth, and then 90% own somewhere around 90%, and then 100% owns 100%. So it's kind of a curve, almost like a banana. Then this is the actual income distribution in the United States, which is pretty bad. 20% own almost 0% of the wealth. 30% own maybe 1%. 50% of the population owns only 5% of the income in the world, in the United States. This is where things start growing, though. 80% own around 45% of the wealth. 90% owns nearly 70% of the wealth, and then 100% owns everything. So it's a general way to measure equality, and it's all based on this one line here. So this is the actual curve. The Gini coefficient is the area of this curve. So for instance, let's say we have feasible equality. The Gini coefficient would be the area of this area of this portion here. This kind of banana peel, so to speak. You will never need to calculate this in a regular economics class unless your teacher is crazy, but it's this general area that's most likely given to you in any question. So let's say this actual income distribution. The way we measure that level of inequality is by calculating the Gini coefficient, which is the area of this portion here. Perfect equality minus actual income distribution. So this general area right here, that's the Gini coefficient. So here's an actual problem here. We see one of the Lorenz curves, and we see Lorenz curve before a tax and after a tax. So try to pause the video, try to solve it. Okay, let's go over this. The Lorenz curve in the graph shows how the effect of a tax system on income inequality. Which of the following statements must be true? So we see that before the tax we have more inequality, and after the tax we have less inequality. So this tax is basically reducing inequality. So let's go through the answer choices. Before the tax, 20% of people lived below the poverty line, but after, 0 did. Well, that's not what the Lorenz curve is necessarily showing us. This could be the Lorenz curve for, let's say the Congo, for instance. Well, if that's the case, then nearly, 40% of the population would be in poverty. But if it's the Lorenz curve of maybe, let's say, the Netherlands, then maybe only 1 or 2% of people are in poverty. The Lorenz curve doesn't measure poverty at all, so A is just wrong. The tax only redistributed income from the top 20% to the bottom 20%. So let's actually see. So 80 used to own 30, then after the tax, 80 owns 70. That's not necessarily true. It basically evened out everyone. So it's not just the top 20% and the bottom 20%. If that was the case, it would look a little weirder. This is more evened out for everyone. So I wouldn't say B. The tax system is proportional. So there's different types of taxes, and we didn't cover that today, but let's cover it now. A proportional tax system means that everyone pays the same rate of taxation. Now, that could be true, but if everyone paid the same level of taxation, then the level of inequality would be the exact same. Because if everyone owes $1,000, then everyone's wealth is going to stay the same. So it can't really be C. D is incorrect. A regressive tax system is where the people in poverty have a higher tax burden than the ultra wealthy. So the wealthy people, they'll pay very little. People in poverty will pay a lot. If that was the case, then inequality would rise because then people in poverty would have less money. So it can't be D. So our only option here, and it's not listed, but it's E. A progressive tax system is what most countries have. It's where people in poverty have a lower tax burden and the ultra wealthy generally have a higher tax burden. So this Lorenz curve kind of shows that. We see that overwhelmingly everyone is more wealthier. The level of inequality reduces. That's a direct sign that the tax system is progressive, so the answer is E. So make sure you understand inequality, the ways we actually show inequality. Like in this question, we showed it through the tax system and the idea of the Gini coefficient. If you do all that, you'll understand the Lorenz curve really easily.